We shift our attention to the off-cycle elections, where on November 11th, eligible voters will go to the polls to elect governors from all 18 political parties in Kogi, 17 in Imo, and 16 in Bayelsa. And these three states were not among the 28 that participated in the February 25th general elections. Joining us to preview the polls is Paul James, Head of Election Programs at YIAGA Africa. Thank you so much for joining us. A very warm welcome to the program, Paul. I'm going to get straight into it. Now, the headlines throughout this week have read doom and gloom with regards to voter apathy, the state of security, or should I rather say insecurity, in the three states involved, but specifically Imo State and Kogi State. What is the temperature you and your observers are currently reading on the ground?
I think it is not far from what you have lined out. I was in Imo until Sunday of last week, and I can tell you the atmosphere in the state is that atmosphere of distrust, that atmosphere of disillusionment, especially in the institutions that are charged with the responsibility of managing the elections. This is also coming on the heels of citizen disillusionment with how the electoral umpire had managed the general elections on February 25th and March of this year. So in also the state, like you mentioned, those feelings are not unconnected to other security crises or election-related violence that are happening in the state. Specifically in Imo, there are about 7 local governments that have been flagged as flashpoint: Oru East, Oru West, Osu, Olu, Okigwe, Ohaji Ema, and Oguta LGAs. In fact, for the commission, it even had to move its services from one of the local government at some point, from Osu local government to its headquarters in the state. And then until last week, before we saw from the commission and also the security that there was a go-ahead for the commission to go back and continue its services in the local government. So what is also happening in Imo specifically is a state of an atmosphere of fear and intimidation of voters, which is what we fear. There are places, especially in the border axis of Oguta local government. Oguta, as we know, border states like Delta State, like Anambra State. So there are communities in those axes that have been threatened or have been warned about their participation in the electoral process. So there have been subtle threats to voters, one-on-one engagement and all of that we are aware of, warning them not to participate in the process. In fact, for us as election observers, one of our observers even had to leave the state for fear of her personal safety. That is in Osu local government. She attended one of our election-related engagement, and then she was fingered as some person that was participating in the electoral process, and then she had to completely even leave the state. For a state like Kogi State, the fear has also been how the political parties have so bastardized the process, especially in one of the senatorial districts. 2 arrowheads in the election, 2 giants in the election, the SDP and the APC. Their political engagement in the states have been riddled with different shades of pre-election violence. And these are also all the states that have history of election violence. And so the fear is that if something is not done urgently to provide assurances and the comfort that the voters want, it will definitely affect participation on November 11th.
Well, Paul, thank you for sharing those insights with us. We do understand that YIAGA Africa confirmed that it's deploying about 328 trained observers and an advanced citizens observation method known as Process and Results Verification of Transparency. That's PRVT. In Imo State. Can you tell us about what your deployment is going to be of your representatives when it comes to Kogi and Bayelsa states?
We are actually going to be in the 3 states. In total, we are deploying 657 observers, 328, like you said, in Imo, 322 in Kogi, and then 9 roving observers in Bayelsa. The idea is to also be able to do a comprehensive observation of the election from observing or tracking what happened at the polling unit level. And at the end of the polls, we'll go to the collation centers, both at the local government level and also at the state level. With that, we'll be able to keep an eye on the entire process of the election. You are right, we are deploying the process and results verification for transparency, formerly known as the PVT methodology. what that will allow us to do is that we are going to get reports in their purest form at the polling unit level. If there are infractions at the polling unit level, the methodology will allow us to expose the infractions. But if what we see at the polling unit level tallies with what INEC announces at the end of the day, then we'll be able to verify the outcome of the election in Kogi State and in Imo State. Those are the two states where we are deploying the methodology. Whilst in Bayelsa State, the attempt for YIAGA Africa is to be able to do roving observation to observe the process, but at the end, we will go to all the 56 local government collation centers and the 3 collation centers in the 3 states.
Great. Now, earlier this week, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu made the announcement that any polling station that experienced violence would have all of its votes cancelled completely. As you read the atmosphere, how is this being received? Do you see this being a deterrent to violence, or do you think this is something that might be hijacked by troublesome politicians?
I think the latter. I am worried, especially. INEC is right. Based on its guideline, it has spelled out some condition to which it might cancel election in the polling unit. 1 is overvoting. 2 is also where the beavers machine is not used. Or 3 is where there is violence. So I fear that politicians could exploit that point around violence, especially in places where they thought could be opposition stronghold. So I am worried that we might see strong armed politics in place, because what we are beginning to see in our election is the gradual injection of violence as another weapon of intimidation in the election. In the build-up to the election, you'll be wondering whether we're at the state of war. The pre-election environment will be riddled with different shades of election-related violence. We are seeing that in Imo, like we highlighted, in Kogi also, like we have highlighted, and also some shades of those sort of threats in Bayelsa State that are quite disturbing. So my fear is that come election day, when opposition or when political parties feel that they are not doing too well, especially in the opposition stronghold, they will want to unleash violence so that results from those locations could be cancelled. Now, when we say violence doesn't even have to be physical, but sometimes even attempt to even disrupt the process, or things like even hijack of election materials, kidnapping of election officials, and all of that constitutes election-related violence. So these are also things that we saw in the 2019 election in the 3 states. In Bayelsa State, there is this saying that he who controls the waters control election. Like we know, over 70% of the area of Bayelsa is covered with water. In 2019, what we saw is that officials of the commission were hijacked. Materials were hijacked, rather. Officials were kidnapped. Even for us as observers, we suffered it. While we do training in Bayelsa in 2019, in some locations we deployed observers. They couldn't even return back to land. We had to, because their boats could not be allowed to pass through. We had to send another boat from Yenagoa to go and convey observers back to safety in Yenagoa. And then what we also saw in 2019 was that on election day, based on the report that we had received, election didn't happen in even 24% of polling units in Bayelsa. Some of these were places where materials were hijacked or officials were kidnapped. In Kogi election, if you recall also in 2019, it was riddled with different form of election-related violence. Election observers suffered it. Even as us at YIAGA, our data center then that was in Kogi was ransacked by one of the political parties. And so, when you see all of these things happening, granted we have had some assurances from the security agencies and all of that, sometimes you want to also see the effectiveness in these assurances, or that when they want to engage, this engagement come early than expected. What is happening in Tristan at the moment, especially from yesterday through today, is what the security are calling show of force. They are there in their numbers, but sometimes you wish that this show of force could happen early, because like we keep saying, if people have made up their mind based on what they are saying in the build-up to the election that they are not going to participate, 24 hours might be too late for some persons to change their mind and then to participate in the electoral process. So I am hoping that on the part of the security, given what is happening in all the 3 states, that they will be up and ready, and most importantly also provide security for observers, for media and by extension to voters and those on election duty.
Well, we certainly hope that that will be the case. But for now, we'd like to thank you for your time. Paul James, Head of Election Programs at YIAGA Africa, thank you for joining us here on Newsday.